crank that up a little bit. Survey says. All right, TikTok says we're live. Look at that. Get all of my bits in here. Live streaming is a thing. So setting up this whole process. All right. That's set up. All right. Now I've got my comments ready. All right, what are we doing here? I had someone reach out today and ask about pulling. I'm just at the tail end of this cold, so I'm still the tail end, the last week and a half. So I had somebody ask about on my message me on TikTok today and say they wanted to tie into a system called Pexels, and I thought this was an interesting use case because what happens is there's a community integration with make.com that you have to install, but as soon as I clicked on it, I think it was well, let's see, there's two, I guess. There's one by this Codex, and then there's one by Max Maltech. This one's paid. It looks like this one's free. Well, I'll go over and check that out. So it's interesting that start integrate. There's communities sort of developing around getting solutions set up or being able to integrate third-party systems, like not just integrate third-party systems into something like make.com, but like third-party providers building out the integrations and having a marketplace around that, which I think is interesting. There's opportunities there. It's sort of just like if you built a plugin for Shopify or something, then you can sort of get into that. But that's not what I wanted to talk about today. I thought it would be interesting to look at what is the right way to get into. We sort of looked at APIs before, but if we have a third-party system, let's go look at this Pexels again. And if they have an API, what is it going to take to integrate that? So start building with the power of Pexels. I use a different site, but we'll try this out. This is basically a stock image site. Best free stock photos, royalty free. And so this can be really good. I know some people are into, generating images with AI for their social media posts or something like that. This would be another option where it's like, the way I will generally approach this, or I think the way I did it, maybe not this one, the images were provided. But I think it would be interesting to come up with, based on the input of the automation or like the content, say we're going to talk about, I don't know, hiking or something, right? Or maybe it's, some kind of business, whatever the topic is, can we push a bunch of keywords into just a stock photo site and then just pluck an image out that we can use for our posting? Because what it does is it just creates an interesting set of problems that we need to solve inside of our automation, right? So yeah, I thought we'd talk about that today. Just messaging folks in the Discord. Let everybody know that we're live. Okay. So I guess what we'll do is we'll just start from scratch. We'll just keep this as simple as possible. We're going to need a couple things. So we're just going to call this, let's name our new scenario. We'll call it a really simple social media automation. Now, I never recommend posting directly to, I think in this case it was Instagram. which does, let me see, Instagram, do they have a Instapage, Instagram for business? So it looks like if you wanted to post directly to Instagram, you need to have a business account. I don't know what that looks like. I use another third-party system for posting to Instagram. It's called High Level. I think it's a fairly popular system just because it gives me a really nice way to sort of review drafts and then sort of pick different places to send that off to. So we can have a look at some of that. So what's the first thing? I guess we need to decide what is the trigger for our automation. I see a lot of people using like Airtable, putting a bunch of things into Airtable, and then having some keywords, maybe having ChatGPT do some research. Um, hey, Loot Fisky, thanks for stopping in. I keep forgetting to check my comments. I see them over there. Yeah, appreciate that. Thanks for the feedback. So, again, I'm always looking for practical use cases in terms of what can we automate, what makes sense in our business. I try to pick things that make sense, like in the real world, things that are practical. Because if you follow me very long at all, you know I try to fish through some of the hype a little bit and just pick out the things that actually make a difference in our day to day. So social media is definitely one of those things where everybody knows they sort of need to be on social media. Most of us are doing a somewhat poor job of keeping up with it to one degree or another, right? So how can we improve this? How can we make this a little bit easier? And you know, if you're doing like just want a simple way to regularly post something every day. I've seen a lot of social media systems out there, or like make.com scenarios that are sort of based off of an RSS feed. But maybe let's go down the Airtable route today. That might be fun. What we'll do is we'll just set up a new base here. We'll just start from scratch, and let's see. We'll call it. What are we going to call this? Our social media automation project, I guess we'll call it that. And green color's fine. So what we're going to do here is maybe we'll just do kind of the keywords thing, I guess. We'll just say like this one can just be an auto ID, and we need to have for a product manager. Bean says, for a product manager, what are some ways I can use Make? I always ask people, what's the pain in your day? What is the pain point, or what is a problem, something you're spending a lot of time on? Is there a process as a product manager that you are, there's a lot of different mistakes happening in your day to day, or something that you could just make? If you're a product manager, are you in software? If it's that particular thing, it might just be looking for, if you had maybe, I'm trying to think now. I spent so many years in the software industry. How would I use an automation in that scenario? Maybe there's opportunities to groom the backlog for tickets or something, ideas that are aligned with maybe what our current focus is on in case we missed anything. I'd probably use automations for like check-ins and stuff. You can minimize the amount of meetings and stuff like that. How can I run an SEO audit for my website? I feel like this is something, if you have an idea, let me show you this because I think this is really interesting. I'm going to pull up my website. I have ideas for SaaS, like kind of SaaS-ish things all the time. So sorry, Angela, before I jump to that, I just want to try and finish this other question for being here. I think there's lots of ways in terms of like, what are the pain points, but just like reminders, check-ins. I think depending on like if you're using like Scrum or Agile or something like that, depending on what methodology you're using, there's probably a ton of opportunities to just like waste less time. I have pretty strong opinions about kind of Agile. And what's good and what's sort of wasting time. So yeah, reminders, check-ins, things like that. there's probably what's going to add the most value from a product manager standpoint. The things that add the most value is like around getting the right feedback, making sure that teams are aligned and pushing in the same direction. Um, I think I I operate in this realm in a business where I try to zoom out from one particular team, and the biggest opportunities for improvement usually with the teams that I work with or the companies that I work with are sort of cross team, like making sure the product team and the management team and the engineering teams are sort of understand why everybody's moving in the same direction. I don't know if there's a really useful automation in there. Let me think about that one. I'll come back to it. I'll come back to it. Okay, Angela's saying, how do I do an SEO audit for my website? So I don't even know that you need necessarily SEO is not this magical thing. Not to get too deep into it, but you can sort of get into um, you can sort of get into the trenches a little bit with something like Answer the Public or like SEMrush or something like that, and just do your keyword research. But you can, if you know what keywords that you're trying to target, then you can use something like ChatGPT to see if you're matching on those keywords. But then there's lots of SEO tools out there. But the one I think that's important is SEO these days isn't just about matching against keywords per se. It's about what is the keyword difficulty and understanding. Um, Understanding are the keywords that you're ranking for on a particular page, um, are they really hard to rank for? Like, is there a lot of competition for those keywords? Or are you sort of hitting those long tail keywords where um, uh, the the ranking, or sorry, the keyword difficulty is a little bit lower? So if we go to, I don't know, I don't use SEMrush. There's a couple of them out there. Um, and again, I'm not an SEO expert. I just kind of I know how it works a little bit. If you go to like Answer the Public is one, you can do some sort of research in here to see like, are there questions people are asking about? You said you're in pool and landscape. Are there questions people are asking about pool and landscape? So let's go. Let's just say landscaping. I'm in Canada, but maybe you're in the U.S. And the where they get this data. So this isn't really on the SEO audit side, um, but SEO really comes down to understanding what people are searching for, what are people asking about this particular business or your particular niche. And then once you understand what people are looking for or what keywords you're looking for, then you need to go in there and uh, um, make sure that you're not trying to, like, if there's a really big player in your area and they've got a lot of content out there, you want to find content that there are keyword areas that they've missed. And yeah, I mean, there's a whole rabbit hole there. It's, again, I don't think it's super difficult. But SEO is really about, there's some strategies you can use AI to sort of build out a bunch of articles that match those long tail keywords that are going to give you easy rankings. And then you can use probably ChatGPT or something like that to sort of analyze your content and see if there are gaps just like on the page. But it's probably not, maybe not even the best tool. I'm sure there's lots of other tools out there. Um, yeah, I hope that gives you some ideas. SEO is a whole business, and I'm sure there's sites you can just plug your website into, and it'll give you, sort of a lot of what you need to know. Obviously, folks have a business out of this, so they're, probably want you to buy a report or something like that. I'm just watching. I realized I made a critical mistake on my live today, so I'm just going to keep an eye on it. Our stream's doing okay, but I forgot to shut off my Wi-Fi and use the wired connection. So we'll just keep an eye on that. If we start dropping some packets here, we're going to just shut the live down and switch networks, but hopefully it doesn't come to that. Let's go back to our automation or our database here. Let me see. This is going to be auto number. So whenever you're working with, we're just going to set up a really simple Airtable for this. Again, I'm sure there's like cool templates out there. I've seen some people do this kind of stuff. This one we're going to just call this keywords. And then it's just going to be just a single line of text is fine. And then we do need a date on this. We have to have at least one date field in order for the automation to work. So, and it needs to be, we'll use created, no, it's not created by, sorry. We'll use the created time. So whenever you connect, excuse me, whenever you connect Airtable to make.com, if you're just listening for new records, then you can just work with this created time field. It needs this time field in order to know sort of when the record was created. But if you want to listen for changes on a record, then you can then you'll want to use this last modified time, because you'll need to pick between one of these two records in order to trigger the make.com scenario. So we'll get rid of some of these and the keywords, and we'll just do we're just gonna do, I'm trying to make sure that let me think here. We want this to be practical, right? We want this to be something, and the whole goal of what we're trying to do is we're going to take something and we're going to generate some content, and then we're going to try and get an image out of a third-party system, and then our goal would be to post this to something like Instagram, right? So, but would you do this? I mean, would you just be like, here's some keywords, generate some social media content? Maybe it's a quote. Maybe is it quotes? Give me some ideas here, chat. Tech Mario says, Angel, you can try using SEOoptimer.com. It will give you an on-site report. Let's do that right now. Let's go check it out. SEO Optimer, is that what it's called? Analyze websites with free SEO auditing reporting tool. Yeah, and there's got to be lots of these sites out there where you can just put something in, and it'll give you, an idea of what's going on. I'm assuming once they do your report on your website, they're going to want to, sell you the report or something. But I mean, lots of these tools are quite affordable. Yeah. So at the 29 level, you don't get to download reports. It looks like it's going to be fairly limited. They sort of want you on the $39 plan, it looks like. And then obviously, if you want all of the advanced stuff, the pro level plan. Again, if you, for me, if you've got the time and you don't want to spend the money on the tooling, I mean, you can sort of comb through TikTok or YouTube and find all kinds of ways that you can approach this. For $60 or even the $40, I would just kind of sign up for a month, run through it. The time in terms of the SEO audit, finding out what you need to do is only half the battle, or probably even less than, like, actually building out the content for your site. You can't just go in and change keywords. You can't just go in and add alt tags anymore. Like you need all of that stuff. But the real work in doing SEO these days, I think, is like getting the content in place, getting the backlinks in place, making sure all of the pages, you have cross-linking in your site and you're aligned on specific keywords, and there's a whole thing to it. I don't think it's necessary. I don't want to minimize it. I was just going to say, I don't think it's rocket science. Like, I think everybody I see that's still doing SEO, they're still talking about the same things. Google is still relevant. Here's some strategies you can use, or tactics, or whatever you want to call it. But the real work, I think, comes in the content, making sure that you have the right stuff in the right place. Yep. So we need an idea. One of the things that we've done, you know what I was thinking about? I was thinking about document parsing, document processing. Maybe we'll come back to that though. We're just going to pretend, that we put some keywords in a, yeah, that feels weird though. We need an idea. If chat's got an idea, we need something that what would you do if you wanted to post on social media? What would your input be? Would it be something that you've done in your business? Like, I mean, maybe a blog post would be a really great place to start. If you had a blog post with keyword, or Tech Mario says Twitter, make Twitter with keyword. And so would that just be a specific tweet? We would just pull in a tweet and use that for the Like if we were going to send this off to Instagram, the whole goal of what I'm trying to do here is the person asked if we could integrate with Pexels, which appears to have an API. So image and video API. And what we're going to try and do is we'll get into the API documentation. We'll set up a connection. Then we'll see if we can do a really simple image search using specific keywords that we come up with. Maybe we'll just stick with that for now, the keywords. And then what we'll do is, so we're going to say hiking in the mountains. We'll just use that for our first one. So the whole point is that we're just trying to connect things together, right? Tech Mario saying, so I was saying make a tweet with the keyword or an Instagram post. Yeah. And so my question was like, if we were to, well, let's just get to the image part. We'll add actual content afterwards. So if we go back to our make.com scenario, the first thing we're going to want to do, we've got our Airtable set up really quick. It's really simple. I usually have the first column be an ID. That just keeps things simple. Here's our keywords. And then we need that create field so that make.com knows that there's something to do here. So when we go to watch records, I'm going to have to set up a new connection here. I'm going to use OAuth. And we're going to call this one the social, what did we call that? Social media automation base. I'll get authenticated here really quick. Oh, hey, I got, hey, Heather, sorry I missed your comment on YouTube. I'm streaming on 2 platforms today, so I know there is a little bit of a delay on the YouTube, a little bit more, and I got to sort of watch 2 different spots for comments. So thanks for the comment. We're trying to automate pulling a keyword, pulling an image from a stock photo site with some keywords in our make.com scenario. That's sort of what we're going to try and do today. All right, so we've got our Airtable connected. We're going to grab that base, and then we'll just use the table one because I haven't renamed it. Here's that part where I said before, we're going to need to have a date in there. So basically this is the one, because when you're watching fields in an Airtable with make.com, it's going to ask you for this trigger field. What's going to trigger this scenario to run? So if we drop new keywords in, we want that scenario to run. And so the trigger field needs to be either created time or the last modified time. So in this case, we have a created time field. It's called create. It's a poor name. And then the label, we'll just use keywords. That's fine. And I'll just pull one at a time for now. I'm not going to worry about the view or the formula. In here, if you have multiple views, like something with a filter on it, or if you want to use a formula would allow you to drill down into, do you want to just select a specific set of records or something like that to operate on? We're just going to grab everything in this particular case. I'm just going to click on all. You have a few options here in terms of where you want your scenario to start. And if I just run this module, we'll just make sure it's going to pull. And so we can see in our output bundle, so we've pulled one record. It's the first one. And there we've got our keywords, hiking in the mountains. So that's good. That's a good start. All right. So the next thing we're going to do, I'm not going to, well, I mean, we've got the, I'm tempted to maybe try and install. We could install, there's 2 community Pexels integrations here, which would be fine. So there's this one here, which is paid, this one here, which is free. This would probably be the right way to do this. So get a photo by an ID, get a video. We'll just see what it gives us the ability to do. Search photos by a specified criteria, or just make an arbitrary authorized API call. Let's have a look at this. I think I will install that. I think we'll try it one way. What happens if I've never installed an app before. So now they're going to want me to sign up for an account for this Start Integrate. This is one of those things where whenever you're automating stuff, there's always a trade-off, right? Um, you're not the only one probably that feels like, oh, I need 24 different accounts just to put something together. There's all of these things I need an account here, I need an account there. We already need to set up an account with this Pexels. So I think what I'm going to do is just set up a Pexels account and just use their API directly. We'll do that. So I will just I'll just create an account. I'll just sign up with my Google here really quick. All right. I'm hoping they're going to give me an API key. They want to know, what do we want to use this for? Just walking through that onboarding flow. All right, now they have my email. I'll be on their mailing list. I don't know about anybody else. I keep one mailbox that's just for all of the junk that I sign up for. All right, so now that I'm signed up, let's go in and have a look at the API docs. So this will happen from time to time where we want to integrate with something. I don't want to use either of these community integrations right now. I mean, I could, but I just want to interact with them and integrate with it directly. So we're going to use the HTTP module. And what we're going to do is we're going to focus on how do we make an API key request to a third-party system that doesn't have a direct integration. How do we get into it? If somebody says that they have an API that we can use in order to access their stuff, how do we set that up? Oh, this is good. Let me try that again. I'm trying to access their API docs and it's giving me an error. We might not be using Pexels today. We might have to. I might jump over to FreePick. I have an account with them. Let me see here. I'm gonna grab my API key here, quick. I think they're gonna give me an API key. I'll just get into my settings. Let me see. Change your password. Additional settings. Profile. Boy, I'm really struggling with this site. They're not giving me kind of what I want. Messaging, additional settings. All right, let's look at another service. Let's use, does anybody have any free stock photo services that they like to use? I use this one. It's called FreePick. They have a bunch of free stuff. I have a paid account on this one. I don't even think it's not a ton of money. But I use this all the time. Unsplash. Let's look at that. I bet Unsplash has, now the purpose of our, probably if we go to Unsplash, yeah, see, they already have direct integration, so that's great. So search random photos. So this would be a great direction to go. Search random photos, and then public collection IDs. We don't have that. Username, query, orientation, content filter, and count. So that might be one way to go. Seems like I have an Unsplash connection here already, so that's cool. So we can search for photos under a specific user within the platform. And then under query, we want to be able to pass in those keywords, right? We want to be able to say our keywords were like hiking in the mountains or something like that. And then we want to get back a photo and then be able to pull down that photo and use it for our post. And maybe if we get far enough today, what we'll do is we'll incorporate ChatGPT and maybe come up with an inspirational quote or something like that. Let's just drop the keywords in there and run this and see what happens. I have no idea if this is going to work. I already had an account set up, so it appears I've used Unsplash at some point in time in the past. So I'll just reset this here. run the whole thing and see what happens. So we've got some output. So the slug came back of this particular photo. Then there's some URLs in here, the raw, the full. Let's go have a look at this. Let's see what photo we got back. That's cool. But that feels like it's too easy. We didn't even have to work for that. All we did was put some keywords in. All right, let's stick with that for now. Let's get the last piece. We can always put in, so what we want to do from here is pull that photo URL out. If I decided I want to swap out Unsplash, right, I'll probably do something like, I could set a variable here, I guess. Set variable, and I might say photo URL. And then from there, we want the, we'll say the regular. Oh, not there. We want that in this. Now, the reason I do this, I could just as easily reference the photo URL in any other module I wanted to, but I'll typically set a variable because if I have more than one module after this step that ends up referencing that URL, I only need to come back and change it in one place. So that's one of the reasons I'll do that. All right. And then from here, I guess if we wanted to, I mean, in theory, we could just post directly to Instagram. Instagram for business, it's saying. So we need to log in, create a photo post, create a reel, carousel. That might be a fun one. Carousels are interesting because you've got to manage multiple photos. But we'll just do photo post. It says I'm connected, so that's interesting. Plug the photo URL. See, this was too easy. Now this is the part here where we need a caption. Let me just save that. I'm going to unlink that. We might want to drop in a ChatGPT messaging assistant. Now I'm not very active on my Instagram, which is something I'm trying to fix. What we'll do is we'll run this. Not message an assistant because I don't need that. I just want to create a completion here. Did I miss it? There it is. Create a completion. And we'll try maybe GPT-4. 01 is going to be a little bit. 4.0 is fine. That should be lots of tokens. Now, just going to say the system role here is, what are we going to tell ChatGPT to do? Your role, you are a friendly, inspirational quote generator. Boy, that's frustrating. If I move this over, there we go. You will be provided with, say, I don't know, some keywords that are being used to find a stock image for an Instagram post. Generate, let me see, generate an inspirational. Inspiration or aspirate? What's that? What inspirational? Inspirational phrase that can be used to accompany the photo. And then we'll add a second message here. And this is going to be the user message. Here are the input keywords. And then from there, what we need to do is we'll go all the way back and we'll grab that keywords from the input. Yeah, that should be good. Mason says, what software are you using for live streaming? I'm using OBS and Restream. Yeah, so that lets me Restream didn't work for, or OBS didn't work for a while. It used to be able to connect directly to TikTok, and then TikTok launched their live studio thing, um, and you couldn't get stream keys anymore. But with Restream in the mix now, they've sort of fixed that. So yeah, and I don't use OBS to the extent that you can. There's a lot more you can do with it. Hey, I've got a few folks on YouTube. That's fantastic. This is my second YouTube live stream. So if you're on YouTube with us today, welcome. All right. This is we're just sort of tinkering this basic automation. I kind of wanted to focus on the custom API, but we can come back to that. We're just like tinkering and putting things together. I'm not going to send this off to Instagram just yet. We'll just unlink that. Apple user says, I have a question. I'm a student. Go ahead and drop your questions in the chat. Let's just run this. I'm going to run this right from the front. So choose where to start. I'm going to go back to all, save, run this. Let's see what ChatGPT comes up with. We're using 4.0, which is like overkill probably, but we'll let it run. We'll see what it does. A couple comments. John says, how much do all of these automation tools cost in total? So you can get away with, if you look at Airtable's pricing, Airtable is free if you're under a certain amount of rows, I think. So if you get into Airtable, the plan overview, the base plan is, I think I pay 30, it's per user. Let me see. Oh yeah, because I'm in Canada, so this 24 US turns into 30 something dollars. But if you have less than 1,000 records, let me get zoomed in there. If you have less than 1,000 records, you're not, and then there's 1,000 API calls. So this is, lets you process 1,000 records in a make.com or something. Or if you were reading a record and then writing it back to Airtable, that would be 500 one way, 500 the other. And then 1 gigabyte of attachment storage. So you've got a few like limitations. Just for getting started, you can go a long way for nothing. I think make.com also has a free tier. Let me just double check that. Yeah, so you get 1,000 operations. Now, this is the part where you need to know that 1,000 operations in make.com does not mean 1,000 scenario executions, okay? So, Apple user, I'll come back to your questions in just a second. So let me just jump back over to make.com and pop open another scenario here. Let's do Jen's Gems. Oh, I think I have it open actually. This one here. All right, so there's a few operations going on here. Let me get that. So in this one, I'm pulling some data from Google Drive. I'm unzipping it. I'm uploading the image, setting some variables, and then I'm doing similar thing again. This is for images and this is for the text down here. And then I upload that to my social media management system. You need to keep in mind that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 operations here. And that doesn't count these ones in the gray here that you can see. I get zoomed in. These ones here that are in this gray, if there's more than one item in there, then it'll run for each time. So if this zip file has 3 items that we're processing, then this will be 12 operations. And if this has 3 items, then this will be 6 operations. So you start to burn through operations pretty quickly. But again, on the free plan, 1,000 ops, you can set up some real basic automations. And then if you need more than that, you can get on their sort of $10 plan or whatever. I think I'm on the $16 plan right now, or no, I'm at the 20,000 operations per month. Month to month, that changes for me. I could go up or down. But yeah, so for not very much, you can get started on both of these with Airtable or make.com. Some of the other systems like N8N, there's a free trial, but once your trial expires, you have to sign up for that one. I'm not even sure about just Zapier. So I don't have a paid Zapier account myself because I use Make. So I mean, like if you've got a budget for anywhere under, and then once you're paid, if you've got a budget of anywhere from like $40 to $50, will go a long way, as long as you're not doing thousands and thousands and thousands of operations. If you need to process, the one example is like when I was processing dealer inventory, there was 250 vehicles in a make.com scenario that had 20 some operations, whatever. So it was burning through literally thousands of operations just in one single go. And processing that every day is not going to be realistic. But if you don't need that kind of volume, then you can get into it pretty cheap. Usually the way I do that, actually, I'll show you that scenario right now. If we go back, scenarios, and I think it was for Cochrane. Let me see the inventory pipeline. This one here. So again, I think there's 24, 29, something like that in here, and anywhere from 200 to 250 vehicles, 20 operations. So just one shot turns out to be about 5,000 in a go. So you'd burn through the $9 account sort of on the second day kind of thing. So usually what I do is I'll prototype things in make.com just to sort of get an idea of what that looks like, and then if I don't need all of the extra ops, I'll just leave it there. But once I understand what the processing looks like, if it looks like I need to run it a lot, then I'll just go back and recreate that. I'll probably still leave the simpler operations in here, or the simpler workflows, because they're a little bit more accessible. But then I'll do like scripting sometimes if I have something that needs to run a lot. Apple user says, I have a project that requires me to make a website. Do you have a stack recommendation or learning resources? There's lots of website builders out there these days, like Wix.com, different things like that. I use a tool called Framer, which I really like. If you want to remove the branding, you do have to pay them money. That's not what I wanted there. I have a few projects in here. Can I share? Yes, I can. Okay. So I use Framer because it's really easy to use and they look great. So I think you end up paying about $20 a month for their, to get rid of their branding. Not to say you have to use this one. I just find it, now that I understand how the system works, I find it fairly easy to use. You can componentize things. They have a lot of templates, which look pretty great. They have free templates. They're let me see, resources. Probably it's under here. Themes is what we're looking for. Academy, support, enterprise pricing. Let's go like this. Framer, themes. Yeah, there we go. Framer templates. Make sure you're on the Framer website and not in some other site, because there's lots. Anybody can make Framer templates, so you might end up on some third-party site. But again, just like this is like a really base template preview. I just find they look really good, and once you get in there, you can just start dragging things around, and you can get pretty far with this system. That's not to say that the other ones, Wix.com and all those aren't any good. There's lots out there. All right. Any learning resources? YouTube and TikTok. I would say that's where to go. And then Google's your best friend there. I do have any recommendations specifically? I guess Apple user, back to your question, like, are you looking to learn more about what's under the hood when it comes to building websites, or are you just trying to get a website up for your business really quick? That would be my question. What are your goals? Are you wanting to learn? Are you like into dev and automation a little bit and want to dig deeper? In which case you want to sink some time into whatever you're doing. Or do you just want to like crank out a site because you need to get something up for your project or your organization? All right. V says, companies using AI the right way has an advantage. I think, who was it? Matt Framer said it right the other day. Getting AI into production is the hard part. There's a lot of hype around AI right now, which is fine. And I use it every day. I use AI for lots of stuff every day. Getting it in production is hard. Getting it to a place where it's doing the right thing is hard. It requires work. If you tell investors you can use AI to cut costs, it's music to their ears. Yeah, but it's hype. You can do lots of things to cut costs. And most businesses, honestly, should use AI, can use AI, but they don't need AI. What they need to do is take a hard look at some of the broken stuff in their business. It's just things they haven't systemized yet. And AI can help with that, of course, but AI is not going to fix a mess, right? And if you are telling your investors that, you can just build out all of these agents and they're going to run your business and, replace all of these people, you're going to have a bad time. It's going to be a mess. Apple user says, I have to make it from scratch with React. Then I would recommend Next.js and find a template. If you're building a website and you need to make it with React, I would recommend Next.js, and I would just find a nice template that gets you started. There's tons out there for free, and I love Next. It's fantastic. Yeah, and there's stuff out there for SaaS templates. There's stuff out there for all kinds of different stuff. You can sort of pick something here. And then I would recommend learning or using a tool called Cursor. You don't have to use it. There's some other ones, but it's the one I use. It's going to cost you, once you run out of credits on the free plan, it's going to cost you about $20 a month. And then you can use AI in the development environment to help you build out your site, and you'll have a pretty good time with that. Yeah. Matthew says, oh, nice. The algorithm is reading across my search history. Just Googled N8N alternatives. Hey, Matthew, I'd like to know, what is it about N8N that you don't like? I mean, I know what I like about N8N and I know what I like about Make.com, but I'm always curious to hear from other users what it is. Because I know another, I think Noah's on here too, right? Who's mentioned they prefer Make.com just for its simplicity. Because N8N gets pretty involved, right? But always curious to know. I like Make.com because it's accessible, it's intuitive. That being said, there are limitations or things that there are limitations that Make.com has right now that N8N can do some more advanced things. Make.com is sort of like you string the pieces together one after the other. You have a little bit of, for instance, you can do a little bit of logic in terms of branches and things like this. But there are some things that N8N does really well. In terms of, I really enjoy the way my trial just expired, so I need to sign up again. But the way they just pop over to their site, N8N here. So yeah, one of the things I like about their system is that they have, you can set up these when you set up the nodes in N8N, you have control over the different paths and where they go. And so depending on the node, we'll have multiple of these different paths. So that's sort of an upside and a downside, because complexity is the thing that's going to get you into trouble, right? Like if you've ever tried to build out workflow, an advanced workflow to replace like a voice flow or something in your business, to build out an advanced, say like a live chat or something, you start to end up with a lot of these really complex workflows, and this one will loop back to this one and the conditional change, and it'll go here, and it can start to get really, really complex really quick. And so that's the challenge with automation, is striking a balance between, can we get into an automation or scenario where we can keep the complexity down and still solve a real business problem? Because let's face it, businesses are complex, and the reason, and this goes back to I think V just said it, robots will not replace humans in quarries or mines for 100 years. I don't think robots are going to replace humans in a lot of things for a while, because the problem is that when we end up in scenarios where we have a lot of complexity, right? All of your staff understand, they don't just understand your problems, they understand the complex decision-making process that needs to happen in order for a decision to be made. And the thing is that we take that for granted because we just make little decisions every day. We make little tiny decisions, right? Let me just pull this up. I've been using this tool called Whimsical. Let me get in here. And I've got this really, not that one. Let me see. Nope. Alignment. Nope. Operations. Let's see. Is it this one? We are playing with this here. No, actually, maybe it is up at the top. Not personal assistant. Untitled. There it is. This is just a faux kind of mock diagram of a flow chart, right? This is like a very simple process. So if you're not familiar with how like flow charts are just like, here's an input, this is a decision, yes or no kind of thing. Here's another yes or no decision, and here's another yes or no decision. So these orange boxes are where AI is pretty good for doing things, in that doing the decisions is what we want AI to do for us. That being said, this is a fairly simple workflow. And so for me or you, when we're working in our job day to day and we're just making decisions or something comes in, if the decision is relatively simple, we don't even think about it, even if there's multiple parts to this. The problem with AI, the problem with doing implementation, and we say that AI in production is hard. Why? Because modeling these simple decisions, even sometimes simple decisions with AI, that's the hard part. The having a string of simple decisions that need to be right, because we need to understand that. Just going to ask the chat, like, how often is AI wrong in any given decision? So we'll just take a poll here. AI is wrong. How much of the time? Is it 5%? Is it 10%? Okay. So that's the question. If you've used ChatGPT, how much does it hallucinate? And so if you've got ChatGPT here, or a Claude, or whatever system you're using, and you've also got it here, and you've also got it here. So we're getting feedback here. Cordigi says 20% of the time. Tech Mario says 30% of the time, right? Even if it's only 10%, we'll give AI the benefit of the doubt here. Gemmin says more than 50, more than half the time. So if you had a staff, John says anywhere from 5% to 100%. And even Bobby says, depending if you've trained a GPT or not. And I would still argue that the challenge, even with the GPT, is like, you've got to just keep an eye on it, because even if 5% of the time it was wrong. And what's our tolerance for error with a staff or ourselves in our positions, right? If we get a decision wrong, like, we understand the mistakes, we put more time into things, and maybe that's part of it. As humans, if somebody comes to me and they want me to make a decision, and I know, just intuitively, I know that the risk of me making the wrong decision is very high, I'm going to spend a lot of time on that decision. But the thing about ChatGPT is, when you ask ChatGPT to make a decision, it doesn't know the difference between a high risk and a low risk decision. It's just going to make the decision. It's just going to go, nope, it's this. This is the highest probability answer. We still need to be the ones that understand if this is low risk or if this is high risk, right? And so if we've got this workflow and ChatGPT is here in these orange boxes, and let's say it's 5%, there's a 5% chance it's wrong here, and there's a 5% chance it's wrong here, and there's a 5% chance it's wrong here. This is what makes AI so hard in production. So we have to make the decisions that it's making as small as possible. Give it the least amount of room for making mistakes, because it will. It still will. It doesn't matter how well you train that GPT, in my experience, it will still make some mistakes. So we have to plan for that. All right. We got a whole bunch of comments here. I'm going to get caught up. Let's see. So V says, there's a reason why we have advanced robots in car manufacturing and not drilling oil. Yep, I would agree with that. One of those is a known process and one is not. Matthew says, don't sleep on the ability humans have to just whack the jukebox or restart the computer. When do you use Make or N8N? Is N8N mostly superior but just more complex, and Make is more intuitive? I think Make is a little bit simpler system. I think it's a little more accessible. It's a little more intuitive. When you jump into a scenario make.com, you sort of only get to go from one bubble to the next bubble. But when you're in N8N, right, you have the ability in some of these nodes to sort of branch off. So we're getting a little bit more into logic and more complex scenarios. There's also some features directly in N8N that they have, like you can build out. I think they have a live chat widget right in N8N. You can manage RAG queries and connect to databases. They have agents directly in N8N, which I see is really popular right now. I was going to talk. I was going to get into end-to-end today, but I think we'll do it on the next stream once I get my account set up properly. All right. So V says a robot can do the same task almost like a 3D printer very well, but if something changes, yeah, that's right. If something changes, you need someone to step in. Cordigi says that's why it's important to be clear with the prompts and detailed. But what happens when you need to go change your prompt? That's the trick. Bobby says critical decisions, add human in the loop. Exactly. Yep. Which is a cool feature. I think that just came out with make.com, right? But was it? I looked at this human in the loop. Either it wasn't quite available yet. Human in the loop. It's an enterprise feature. Yeah. So what's an enterprise plan on make.com? Core, Pro, Teams. I guess you got to contact them for enterprise, which is kind of annoying. And so, we started out talking about like social media posting. I think that's what makes Airtable so attractive is I see a lot of people doing things like we've got some process. This is just like posting something, but here we've got, maybe approved, right? We could have a field in here called approved, and then it's just a single select. And then we could just say pending, and then we could have another one here called approved, right? And then what you can do is have this default to pending. So your human in the loop is somebody's got to physically come in here and have a look at the table and make a change, and that triggers the next part of the process maybe. But yeah. Just checking to see if I've missed any comments. Jemin says, you never know what the output will be, even if you've trained it, even if you use a big data set. And the problem is when the bigger your data set gets, the harder the training gets. Unless you are actually training the model itself. So this is where, when we talk about RAG queries, there's not just one kind of RAG query. There's all of these different types of RAG designed at trying to make these generations more deterministic, because that's 100% of the problem with AI models. Is that they are inherently, let me get back to my chart here. The problem is that, we had this question, AI is wrong how much of the time? 100% of the time, this number is greater than 0. That's the problem. And so when we look at the benchmarks for different systems and models out there, when they say DeepSeek is better than, ChatGPT, Claude is better than whatever, they're benchmarking these models against a series of tests to see how well they score against all of these things. But there's no 100%, right? They're not 100% correct, because that's just the nature of the whole thing runs on probability. So even with your prompts and all of that other stuff, we need to be aware that there is a non-zero percentage of the time your system will do the wrong thing. And so planning for that is critically important when designing our systems. I think AI points us in the right direction. So v says, even predicting the weather is so difficult, AI can't fully help us with that yet. I see lots of stuff out there about, AI helping like detect things in like different x-rays and things that doctors can't see yet. Again, I don't think it's 100% right, but if it's partly right, then there's obviously a benefit there. Understanding new drugs, understanding new chemicals and things, like I think there's lots of possibilities there. Maybe detecting things in weather. Weather is like an immensely complex system. The weather is so complex that I could see the models helping maybe, but I'm not in weather. I think that's probably like one of the hardest problems you could probably tie into, just from my naive perspective. Usman says, sup, AA Ron. That's funny. AA Ron. My grandma used to call me that when I was a kid. Action Handler. Have you tried writing code with Cursor? I use Cursor all the time. I use it every day. Yeah, we were just talking about Cursor. And we had another user on here. I think it was Apple. User was saying they needed to work on building out website with React, and so I would definitely recommend Cursor. When I'm using Cursor, I jump back and forth between different models, and even that. Whenever I hear people say, this is one of those things. Whenever I hear people say that AI is going to take all of our jobs or replace us, my first thought every single time is, it's the person who's saying this actually using AI every day. Because if you were, you would be keenly aware of the limitations of all of these different systems. For anything that's just fun or novel, generating interesting AI images and stuff online, that's fine. For simple automations, for like maybe voice chats or live chat on a website that doesn't have a lot of responsibility, pretty straightforward, pretty low risk, not a big deal. But when you get into high complexity scenarios like writing code, right, where there's a lot of tokens and there's decisions. If you're not a programmer, you need to understand that programming is just a bunch of logic decisions. If this, then that, to the nth degree. Logic puzzles stacked on top of logic puzzles. And so when you build something out, you're just handling all of these different branches, right? Let's jump over to Whimsical. We can probably whip together something that I want a mind map this time. Can I just create a new blank? Board is fine. Mind map is what I want. So when you start getting into logic puzzles, you start to have branches, and they just branch out. There's another one here, and there's another one here. So you have 3 different branches, and then your branches have branches. Sorry, that's not the one I want. I need to go here. And then these can have, I'm just going to start giving these numbers. I need to put something in to make this happen. And 4, and then this will have branches. This is a very naive representation of how coding works. But basically you have a bunch of if-then logic that can do different things. And some of these may link back to earlier spots in the puzzle. This is a very, very simple representation of how complex things get really quickly. So even using Cursor in the best models in a programming sense, when you've got loops in here, you've got things that link back to, you've got things that reach in and use other pieces. These are very complex puzzles, and AI can spit out the code, but it doesn't mean that your architecture is accurately being represented, because software is 100% about complexity. It's about modeling the complexity of your system or creating a series of logic puzzles that you need to represent. Let me just look at a software diagram here. Right? Even the most simple software diagrams we might find online, we find that they're all about modeling a different variation of some kind of complexity. And so every software system, excuse me, every software system inherently is a little bit different, even though we reuse a lot of the same components. Every software system is some variation of some complex process. And so again, AI can write the code for a small chunk of this really well. But the problem is when you get into too many pieces of information, too many moving parts. And if you're using Cursor every day, excuse me, if you're using any of these systems every day, oh, I've got a frog in my throat now. Just at the tail end of this cold. What you find with something like Cursor is that it will start to forget important details. And again, we talked about this a minute ago, right? Where if you have a low risk decision and a high risk decision, AI doesn't know the difference between those. And this is actually the problem with writing code with AI. Not to say it doesn't work well, because it does, but you still need to be in there watching the AI do the work and understand where it's made mistakes around the high risk decisions. Because what Cursor will do is it will forget that you, Claude, I'm saying Cursor will do, it's Claude or ChatGPT or whatever model you're using. It'll forget a dependency that you needed, or it'll just arbitrarily change the dependency in one of the files. Because you'll say something like, I need to, you'll be working with a program where you need to interface with a third party API. And so by default, you're just using the built in fetch or whatever. And then, what'll happen is you'll ask it, I need to make a request to this other system. And because of however it was trained, because all of the documentation on the internet that has to do with that other third party system references an older API or an older function or an older library or an older something, all of a sudden Cursor will just, or Claude or ChatGPT will just sort of forget the current method that you're using to do that, and it'll introduce some other random code from some other reference that it was trained on somewhere. And now you've got these, and you just end up with this sort of, it's an easy breakage to fix. It just illustrates something that happens many, 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 many times a day if you're actually using something like Cursor for coding, because it'll just forget. It'll just forget 15 minutes ago you just worked together designing this one part of your program, and then you get over here and you mention something else, and it'll just decide that you don't need that anymore and delete a bunch of code. Like, it just forgets. And it really accurately illustrates the problems with AI and complex systems, is that AI doesn't know the difference between low risk problems, low risk decisions, and high risk decisions. It's just sort of playing a numbers game. Whole bunch of comments here. Let me get caught up. V says, making models to predict weather and patterns is so complicated, and we're still guessing in 25. I would believe that 100%. V says, I've heard predicting the weather in 2025 is as difficult as working with quantum mechanics. It just makes me think, I mean, are those things really that different? The weather's got to be the most, because it's like, it just makes me think of particle systems in like 3D engines, right? It's just like the most advanced complex particle system you could imagine, because it's the weather, right? I mean, everything in the weather influences everything else in the atmosphere, and so it just is inherently the most complex thing. V says, you can guess and be right 90% of the time, but getting to be sure 100% is almost sci-fi. And I would agree with that. I think we're gonna see things get really close, and that's actually why we're seeing agentic systems, right? That's why we're seeing all of these little agentic bits and pieces, is because all that is taking big hard problems and breaking them down into little problems and easy decisions, right? You've got an agent that you're like, can you make me an appointment at 1:30 p.m. on Tuesday? And it knows how to do that. If you just gave ChatGPT access to the internet and APIs, and without any direction or any kind of guardrails, it wouldn't be able to do it. You would have to just say, and ChatGPT or whatever you're using doesn't even know that there's an API there. It just knows that it has a function called create calendar event, and it needs to pass in certain parameters, and some other part of the system takes care of the actual event creation, right? So the reason agentic systems exist is to make the problems smaller so the models can be a little bit more focused on one thing, which really illustrates the whole problem, that we're dealing with an immense amount of complexity. In order to deal with complexity, we have to make the problem smaller. Action Handler says, I find starting a new chat thread every once in a while is good when it starts messing up. Yeah, I would agree with that. And I saw somebody else do something the other day. What was it? Was it on YouTube? It was about the reason they didn't want to start a new chat was because they didn't want to lose all of the context of their old chat. So I think the very last thing they would say in the thread is like, can you please summarize everything we've decided in this so I can copy paste that into a new thread so we can sort of pick up where we left off. Be very detailed on our conversation and our decisions. Yeah, so I've seen a bit of that. And again, what happens is that you're running up against that token limit, right? You've had a lot of conversation. You've instructed AI to do this. It made a mistake. It made a mistake the other way. You finally came to a conclusion. But again, looking back, the way an LLM looks at that, those three decisions, your whatever model you're working with will just forget which the right decision was. It just sees tokens. It just sees vectors, right? V says, if astrophysicists give the theory of matrix a 35% chance, that seems too high, right? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that one. Torchbearer, Okoi? I don't know how to pronounce your name, sorry. Can you keep this from happening with negative prompting? The problem with negative prompting is that sometimes if you, what's an example of this? If you say to ChatGPT, always use this format, never use this other format. Sometimes when you say never, you with a like say like a ChatGPT, sometimes you'll get the opposite result. It'll actually focus on what you don't want. So if you can turn that into a positive prompt, always use this format, always avoid this other format. That's still like a positive, right? You're not saying never, you're saying always still. So you have to kind of play with that and see what your results are like. John says, when the TikTok ban happened, VPN didn't work. Did I need a different phone from a different country? I'm not sure. I'm in Canada, so all that happened here was TikTok got kind of quiet for a day, from my perspective. And I know live, I was having an issue going live on the weekends, so whatever happened there was definitely affecting lots of us. Don says, funnily enough, quantum computing is your best bet for weather prediction. I know zero about weather prediction, and I know even less than that about quantum computing. I sort of keep an eye on it, but I understand like it's about probability and about like entanglement and collapsing the whatever. And yeah, that's a little bit too much for my brain to process. V says, scientists making qualified assumptions. Sorry, let me read that again. Scientists making qualified assumptions is in many areas people's facts. Yeah. The thing about science, and see, this is it's an interesting comment actually, because this sort of relates back to my business, which is I work with organizations to help bridge the tech gap. And the reason I say that is because I feel like, just in my experience in like even my own family or my own circle of friends and things like that, people who are not, I'll say, tech savvy or computer savvy tend to view technology with a bit of a, what's the right word? Just tend to view technology as like magical. And I see that even more so with AI, right? We just think, and we have all of these names for people in tech, wizard, code ninja, right? Magician, because that person might sort of understand some bit or piece of that we don't get. And in a lot of ways, I don't see this getting better. I see it getting worse. I tell people all the time, I used to fix computers. When I first got into computer stuff, I used to fix people's printers because they couldn't get their printer working. And so that's sort of what I do now, except it's just not printers anymore. It's just sort of technology in general. And the thing is that AI and LLMs and all of this computing and even the internet and all of the stuff, it's not magical. It's science. And it's all on probability. None of these systems work 100% of the time. The internet isn't up 100% of the time. There are failures that happen behind the scenes in our internet systems that you just don't see because there's fail-safe systems. They fail over to other systems. There's redundancy. There's backups. There's a whole bunch of things that we practice in engineering on the internet side of things, in software engineering and infrastructure engineering, that is just about keeping things running all the time. Right? We practice things called disaster recovery. If this goes away, how fast can we get the whole thing back up and running again? Right? ChatGPT just OpenAI just had one of those live practice sessions the other day. ChatGPT outage, right? Because they want to avoid outages, so they practice them on purpose. But it's not magical. It's a science. All of this stuff is science. It's ones and zeros at the end of the day. The probability of a thing. And so just in the same way that AI is wrong at least a non-zero percentage of the time, 2%, 5%, depending on the prompt, depending on the whatever, right? In that same way, internet systems and networks will fail eventually. They will fail, and they will fail eventually. There's a 100% probability, given enough time, that any network or system will fail. And it just makes me think about things like NASA, right? They send rockets into rocket science is hard. Sending rockets into space, they have like triple and quadruple redundant systems for when because they know things will fail. So they have multiple fail systems in place, right? And so I think when I think about AI, when I think about just that back to that statement that V said, scientists making qualified assumptions is many people's facts. We we have to, or at least me, I have to approach, AI and a lot of these things with a little bit of skepticism because I see the failures. I see where things fall apart. That's been my day job for over a decade, helping keep these things running. And so I always push back a little bit on the AI thing because the other thing that I see besides the fact that, we have failures and all these different things is we also have the marketing and the hype, right? AI is so hot right now. AI, voice, chatbots, and people, when people come and they ask, I need what somebody messaged me the other day? I need an AGI for my something. And so it was like, okay, we're sort of mixing terms, but that just, it gives me a sense of like, how much does the person I'm working with understand or maybe not understand about how these things work? And nine times out of 10, it's a lot, right? So we got to sort of, uh, reinforce expectations around what is possible with these things, and especially depending on the risk, approach them with caution because again, this is a science, right? Um, Lutfisky says, being on the system side for 25 years, it's baked into my DNA. So much hype nowadays. I agree. Yeah, I completely agree. Um, V says, we know the moon will never fall from the sky, but it's still theory. Very likely to be true. I don't know if that's, I mean, given enough time frame, we know that given a long enough time frame, anything is possible. Richard says, bruh does not know system design. Not sure which bruh you're talking about. That's fine. Oh, there was another question there, John. I missed your other question. John says, are you more into IT software and networking? Do you know electronics or EE? I'm not, electronics is one of those electronics is one of those things I've always wanted to do and I've never, like, I get it. I understand the math. I've always had an interest in electronics and I've always dabbled in. You remember back in the, I don't know if they had that in the States, but we had a thing here called Radio Shack. You used to be able to buy these little kits with the breadboards and you could make a radio and you could make all these different things. And I had one of those when I was a kid and I played with it, but like, with electronics, I always felt like there's something I was missing. I think I get it now, and I see people building like calculators and computers and like Minecraft and stuff, and I understand how logic gates work and all that. Like I get it. I always just felt like there's something I'm missing when it comes to electronics. The whole thing is fascinating. My background is in IT and software specifically, so I'm a generalist. I get networking. I'm not a networking specialist. I can't do like cider math. I still use a calculator. I, I know enough to get things set up. I practice more in software. The things I focus on when I build software in software teams is business and team alignment, security, and automation typically. So we kind of call that DevOps, but it's a broad area. I'm a generalist. I touch a lot of different areas, but I also study business strategy. Business strategy as it pertains to technology or IT and business strategy. A fellow by the name of Simon Wardley. All companies are fundamentally dependent on tech, especially as we tie into more of these systems, even our cell phones, our email. I do know a few businesses still that do stuff on paper, but like by and large, we are all technologically oriented, and so understanding how these things work and understanding where the pieces are moving is important from a business strategy standpoint. Most businesses don't need strategy, probably will never be there because it doesn't affect, unless you were like if you're a plumber, service worker, home service person or something like that. Your strategy is not going to change much. People still need plumbing. If you're growing your business and you're doing research in like plumbing and where the home building markets are going, things like that, then yeah, the tech strategy and just strategy in general is more important. Um, Yeah, and just understanding why things are moving, and why we should adopt certain things and what we should be skeptical of, I guess. Yeah, so that's kind of a long, meandering answer to a short question. My background's in software, but I do automation and I study business strategy. Yeah. V says, if you are best at coding in IT, is there a limit to what you can do given enough time? I think that's a really open-ended question. I'll answer it the best I can without meandering everywhere. Let's see. Is there a limit to what you can do? Yes, you're always limited by complexity, and it's really interesting. It's like we haven't learned this in the industry yet. This is a good example because I have a relatively complex make.com workflow set up on the screen here. And I see these creators on TikTok lots of times with these like really elaborate, 400 node sort of workflows and all of this stuff. And it's like they might be using that day to day for their own purposes. If they're using it for their clients, maybe. The problem is that, but the problem is when you reach a certain degree of complexity, there's a certain amount of complexity that's baked into everything, right? Businesses have complex systems. There are decisions that need to be made in order for that business to function. And if you're in automation, if you are when I come into a business and I start interfacing with the team, the business owner, the stakeholders, in terms of how do we automate these pieces to make your business more efficient, systemize things, reduce errors in your different workflows and stuff. 9 times out of 10, the hardest problem is like teasing the actual process out because the users, the staff and the people in the business just automatically assume that they have to do certain parts or they don't. Again, we talked about this earlier on the live where it's like, once we actually talk about all of the little decisions that are being made in a process, we sort of take all of those little micro decisions for granted and that we just do them in our day to day. We don't even think about them. But when we're trying to model those things out in a workflow, that's where our complexity starts to get built into that process. Now, that's not to say that that's necessarily a bad thing, but having worked in software systems over like literal decades, I can tell you that we debate about all of the ways to properly, like correctly build software in the industry. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much you lean or agile or whatever your software systems and debate about testing frameworks and all of these different things, you will hit a degree of complexity where it is just difficult to make changes. And so that's what I think of when regarding that question. Is there a limit to what you can do given enough time? The amount of time it takes to make a change in a complex system is much greater than the amount of time it takes to make a change in a simple system. And so we ought to opt or have a bias towards simplifying the things. That's why we rewrite things from scratch. It's like, I'll just start over. We'll just start over. This has just got too complex. It's out of hand. We can't manage this anymore. And then we just start that cycle over again. So the biggest barrier is not necessarily the tools. It's not necessarily though we can make a mess along the way and make bad decisions. But we need to understand that given enough time, in any even the most ideal perfect scenario, that system will still become sufficiently complex enough that we have difficulty making changes in it. And so one tactic or doctrine we can use is a bias towards simplifying things. That's Aaron's doctrine. That's not Simon. That's not Wardley's doctrine. Um, okay, more questions. Let me see. Cassidy, welcome back. V says, I imagine an AI has taken over as the best hacker a long time ago. Am I wrong? I know there are folks that are. See, the thing is that AIs don't just do things on their own. They're directed by people. So it's not that the AI has taken over. It's that an AI system has been designed or is being utilized by hackers to develop more complex hacks. And it is true. It's happening all the time now. And so I heard someone say the other day that the best defense we have against AI hacking is AI, which scares me because the risk of getting your AI hack wrong is pretty low, but the risk of getting your AI hack defense wrong is very high. Lutfisky says, I've been down the make.com road for a while and wondering if I need to get proficient at ECMAScript. Well, we kind of call it JavaScript, but yeah, there's nothing wrong with knowing a bit of JavaScript. There's especially, again, somebody asked about N8N. Did I miss that comment? I think I missed that comment about N8N a bit ago, or I saw it and I forgot to come back to it. Knowing a little bit of JavaScript is not a bad thing. It's sort of like knowing how to do formulas in your spreadsheets. Not a bad thing. Yeah, you should know. Should know if you know a little bit. You don't. No, I won't say should. You should know. If you know a little bit of scripting, then what you're doing is you're leveling up your tech skills. And I mean, like, what are you? There is software in your kettle. There's software in your toaster. There's probably software in your faucet. There's software in your heated seats. There's software in, like, we've made smart devices out of so many things. And now we've got APIs and all of these different things. It's just like technology has proliferated. So if we level up our tech game a little bit, and to sort of sharpen that point a tiny bit, that's my whole career, is just like level up a little bit, level up a little bit, level up over here, level up over there. Every day I have to level up what I'm doing in some particular tool or technology every single day, because that's my job. That's all it is, learning new stuff, always, constantly. That's what I've done for the last 30 years. Do you have any, Wet Salt says, do you have any chatbot builder suggestions? Ideally, something like voice flow with a human handoff. I like voice flow. I use a system called Go High Level. It's kind of markety. I call it like the 80-20 system. One of the things I like about it, and I'm sure there's other systems out there that do that. They've got the ability to build really simple bots, or you can, reach out to make.com or something. But the thing I like about it is that you can turn the bot off and have a person jump into the conversation. You can see the history. So if there's other systems out there that would let me do that, I would definitely test them out. Because that's sort of like, whenever I think about automation, automated agents, chat automations, all those kind of things, the first thing I want to know is, how do I get in there and fix it when something goes wrong? How do I see, or like, I'm always experimenting with, like, the simple agents are fun, but been working on one automation for a car dealership for a while, and it's just hard. It's hard to make it. Actually, we've got the RAG side of it down pretty good now, modeling the workflows for the car dealer. But if you work with car dealers, I have a background in the automotive industry, on the software side. If you've ever worked with them, you know that if you ever get anything wrong ever, there will be somebody screaming on the other end of the phone at you, right? So it's so important to be right, or to have things to be correct, or that when things go wrong, that you know right away and you know how to fix it. And so that's what makes AI in that space so challenging, because we just talked about that. AI is wrong at least some of the time. Every single time AI is a little bit wrong. So how are you managing that? How are you managing that complexity? V says, I went to school with a guy saying he could forever be ahead of firewalls and security systems online. He might have just had a big ego, but he was very convincing. I think there are probably people like that out there. We never really know. The thing about security is not there are things you can do to be proactive in security, but security is a defense game. You don't know. That's why we have these things they call 0-day vulnerabilities, where it's just like, when they come out, they're a big deal everywhere, because we don't know that these vulnerabilities exist until people call them out, right? We don't know that there's a hole. We don't know that there's holes in the ship until somebody sees the leak. Lutfisky says, got local N8N installed as well to practice my JavaScript. Nice. Local N8N is good. I think there's some, I should play with that more. I hate, I'm at the other end of my career. It's like, I don't want to host things anymore. Let's pay someone to do it for me. Savi says, where should simplicity begin and in which process? So sometimes simplicity means taking a complicated process and breaking it down into smaller parts. And so there's two sides to that. If you're trying to model something in a business, if you're trying to come up with a solution for a business, then it's like, where can we take the biggest bite? where can we, you've heard that expression, right? Like the, the, the juice is worth the squeeze or whatever, right? Where can we squeeze on the business where we'll get the most benefit? And then one of the problems we run into a lot of times, we were just talking about this a minute ago, where we start, digging into sitting down and like, okay, what goes in that? Well, actually, like, I want you to walk me through this process. I know you told me that you just take this thing from here and you put it into there, but I know that in your mind, there's 7 things that have happened. And then when we get into it, it's like, okay, you actually email that person and they get back to you, and then you double check some things here and then whatever. There's more to this process than what you're telling me, even though we've sort of simplified it. So the process is inherently more complex than we thought it was, now that we actually have it down on paper, right? Where's that chart? Right? We thought it looked like, I should actually build out another one of these. We thought the process looked like this, but it's actually like 7 times more complex than this, because there's 4 decisions in here we didn't realize we had just internalized, right? So once we understand what that process looks like, simplifying means just, let's just take a bite off one end, right? We might just, okay, let's see if we can take this chunk out and automate that. Just one piece. Keep the problem simple. The process hasn't changed. And actually, I should clarify that when I work with businesses, I try not to change the process they're using. I try to slide automations into an existing process as to not disrupt what their workflow looks like, because those disruptive changes can actually make things worse. If you can get a process into a business, into an existing process, right? An example of this was when I was working with a realtor recently, and they're like, well, we upload these files to Google Drive, and then somebody else grabs them from Google Drive and does this and this and this, and puts them, does some stuff and puts the stuff on the website. And so I said, okay, well, let's interface with the exact same Google Drive that you're using and the website, and we'll just automate those 3 steps in the middle. Right? So we're not changing we're not changing the interface that they're using in order to build out that process. Thank you. Let me have one more. Yeah, thank you. I'm trying to take my coffee away. I hope that makes sense. Savvy. Hello to my YouTube watchers. It's my 2nd live stream on YouTube. Keeping an eye over there for comments as well, but all the action's happening on TikTok right now. Let me see. I'm just getting caught up on the comments here. Wow, a bunch of them went by. Adam says, what is your go-to get more clients solution for your clients? Most people don't want to hear this one. Social media. You should be talking about what it is that you do on social media. And I know most people don't want to hear that because they don't want to be on social media. Don't be a social media consumer, be a social media creator, be a content creator. That doesn't mean that you need a high production things. That's not to say that this is the only solution, but if you have information or a solution that's valuable, and you talk about your process, or you talk about tips and tricks around, let's talk about a plumber. Every plumber should have a TikTok or something like that, right? Because if you can be on TikTok talking about, hey, when you hire a plumber, think about this or that, or you should not be on TikTok being like, buy my service, on sale. Nobody wants to hear it. But if you're on TikTok and they're like, hey, when you have a plumber come in and they're looking at, under your sink and they're fixing this thing, ask them to do this. It's going to save you money on this. Or if you got a plumber come in and they're doing your thing on this or whatever, ask them to have a look at your hot water tank while they're there and save on the trip. You should be doing that once a year anyway. Those sort of day-to-day trips and the things you would train a junior in your industry, or the things you would want every customer to know when you work with them. If you've ever had a plumber over and just had like a 5 or 10 minute conversation while they're standing there, whatever, and they just feed you all of this stuff, and you're like, wow, that's amazing, I want to hire this guy again. That's the stuff you should be putting on TikTok. You should be giving away all that value for free, and then people will just want to work with you. That's not the only way. Like, you need all that other stuff. You need a newsletter. Like if you're a plumber, you need a newsletter. Sorry, you just do. Because your August newsletter should be like, hey, it's time to check your hot water tank for build up or whatever. Hey, did you have your furnace serviced? Hey, did you whatever? Like at least 4 times a year, if not once a month. Probably 4 times a year. For almost any home service business, I would say, and almost any business, at least 4 times a year, you should be sending out a newsletter. Because it's about, hey, did you forget you need to do this thing? I was saying this to someone the other day, like every time I need a plumber or someone to do the furnace at our house, I got to go back on my email and find them. Oh yeah, who was that again? Who did I use to get the plumbing done last time? None of them has ever contacted me about anything. And they probably should. Next question. V says, if it's all ones and zeros, maybe he was into something. Not smart enough to understand. I don't know that he's reading the binary, but Addison says, what's your job? So I bridge the tech gap for businesses. So I do automation, I do some AI implementation, and I do consulting for technology strategy. And what that means is I will typically come into a business. I think businesses think they need AI right now, and I'm not saying that AI can't help. But if you have processes, or I think a lot of businesses aren't ready for AI. In that AI is really great for things like this, where you've got a process that you've modeled, you understand what that looks like. And if you stick something like AI in these decision points, right, this is a workflow here, right? There's a workflow. Got some input, decision is made, yes or no. Some decision is made, yes or no. This decision, yes, goes here, no goes back to here. This is just like a made up workflow that probably represents lots of processes in our business. Most businesses have no idea what, like they're doing all of this or some of this, and they have people and they're sending emails and doing all these things, and they haven't systemized anything. And so AI makes like probably no sense to them. It probably doesn't make sense for their business. Or it could, like, maybe lead gen or something like that. I will come in and work with businesses to understand what these systems look like, and help to systemize them in a way that makes it easier to train people, reduces the number of errors, and reduces the amount of wasted time. Sort of systemize, like increase efficiency. And if we use AI in there, great. And sometimes, just working with a business to like, how do we use ChatGPT? Well, let's set up a custom GPT that understands the regulations that you work with every day. That'll help fast track some of the process of, maybe these reports or these, whatever that looks like. And then I help advise them on things like security concerns, where they should and should not be using AI. Something I call a risk complexity framework for AI, which is understanding which processes in our business we should be using AI and which processes in our business that we should be cautious about using AI. How to make sure that we're not. And you know what? Like, show of hands, if I say the phrase good password hygiene, show of hands, how many people know what that means? Right? I talk to businesses and I teach people about, I bridge that tech gap. I talk about things that people aren't even aware of. Because I work with a lot of businesses. Actually, you know what? Nobody raised their hands. I got a better question for you. Raise your hand. I'm glad to hear that, Bee's Knees. Raise your hand if you are sharing a login to some system with somebody else in your business. Raise your hand if you have a password that you share with other users in your business. Could be a Google Drive password, a OneDrive login, could be a Zoom, it could be for Zoom, it could be for Make.com, it could be for anything. I work with, I was on the phone with a client the other day, and they said, I said, well, what are you using? Are you using this? Are you using that? What about Google Drive? Are you familiar with Google Drive? And they said, yeah, we were using Google Drive, but somebody couldn't remember the password, and then they reset it, and then that locked everybody out. And I was like, oh, we're talking about automation on, the marketing side, and automating payment systems and doing things so that, they're sort of spinning their wheels doing all of this stuff. And I'm like, we need to sit down and talk about passwords. You have, a dozen people sharing one login to your Google Drive. Like, Why do you not, they don't have anybody in place, or they don't have systems in place or anything in place really to manage onboarding and offboarding. And we talk about hacking and we talk about AI and we talk about all of these things. The risk to your business of just having a password that everybody in your company knows is huge. If somebody knows the password to your, I don't even like your Google account or even your analytics or your social media, and they leave the company and you don't change that password, you don't have like a process in place. It doesn't have to be complicated, but they're like, oh, it's, if you need to, if I say everybody needs a separate account, you're like, that's too much work. I'm like, you don't fully understand the amount of risk you're taking on by not having something in place for that, right? It's massive. It's a massive amount of risk. I'll tell you a quick story. I used to have this story on my TikTok and then I took it down because it was going viral and it was freaking me out. So I used to work for this company and they owned startups. They owned startups. That's their job, was they would buy startups that were too small for the big companies to buy. They made sure they were profitable, but they would buy startups. And they had about 20 of them. The short version of this story is that on a Friday afternoon, I was on one of their teams and I got a message from he's an SRE, but basically a system administrator who worked across all of the teams. And he was saying they were having trouble. One of their businesses was down and they were having trouble getting it back online. And the short version of the story is that, and what we think was probably an ex-employee had logged in at some point and diverted their database to another system and nobody noticed. And then after the backups were all empty, because the backups were still in place, but that the production database had been wiped and the production system was talking to another database in another account. And then after that had filled up with empty backups, basically, after a month, they logged back in and deleted everything and logged out, and the business went offline. They couldn't restore. They didn't have anything in the backups, because the database had been empty for a month. The production database that they were talking to, that they thought was their database, which wasn't, went away because it was in a totally different account, and they couldn't get the system back online. Right? They didn't have any processes in place for good secrets management. Right? They were all sharing root access to their systems. They didn't have any secrets rotation processes, any policies. They didn't have anything in place. And I mean, and it wasn't like a massive business, but they were doing like 25K US a month, and it just shut off just overnight. Sorry, we're not in business anymore, because somebody deleted all of our stuff. Actually, I know of another story of a company in Europe. Same thing happened to. They just shut their doors overnight because an ex-staff who had access to everything logged in and deleted everything, and they couldn't recover from it. So if you are sharing passwords in your organization, understand that that's a massive, massive risk. You don't need AI. I mean, you might need AI a little bit, but what you need to do is look at your password management policies. You need to get something in place that protects your butt now with the stuff that you have, right? It reduces your risk for what you've worked so hard to build up what you have now, right? Get good practices in place that protect that. Sort of like insurance, right? You wouldn't operate without insurance. Just catching up on my comments here. Savvy says that was an excellent visual representation and insightful advice. I'm glad that helped. Thank you for the feedback. Have you worked on strategies for schools or classes, and what brought the best results? I'm not sure. I haven't worked on strategies for schools. That's an interesting thought. I'll have to think on that. Copy says, I want to learn AI automation. How do you start? What is the roadmap for learning? I would start with something like, what do they call that? Make.com Academy. I'm sure all of the players have this now. Make Academy. There it is. I think it's free. I don't even think you have to pay for it. You can just go in here. They give you a little certificate at the end. I would start there. Get an understanding And I would do that for as many. I would do that with a few different providers. Find a course on Airtable. Find a course on um, Zapier. You could probably burn through this in Foundation, Basics, Intermediate, Advanced. Probably a few weeks. You could probably burn through the whole thing. I haven't taken this. I'm sure there's stuff in here I would learn. But yeah, start there, and then YouTube or TikTok, right? Toast says nobody wants to share anything with me. I'm assuming you're talking about passwords. Don says yes, but to cheat licensing costs, that's a real thing. At the end of the day, what's the higher cost, though? If it's just like a third-party system like Zoom, maybe it's low risk. But I mean, is it high? Maybe you have all of your videos stored on there, and you use those videos for training or for onboarding or for some other purpose. And like, what if they went away? Do you have backups? Are you mitigating the risk? Do you have a plan in place? That's the real question. What is your plan for when things go wrong? What is your opinion on Andrew NG? I don't have one. I don't think. B2B says, B2B Mo. I saw a company where all users' passwords are in an Excel file unencrypted. Wouldn't surprise me at all. V says, in string theory, understanding why dimensions above the 11th gets unstable is hard to grasp. My brain wasn't built for string theory. Addison, I did not go to college. I do not have a post-secondary education in tech. I just fell into it. My accolades are I got an award for computers in high school, and I was just curious. I honestly didn't take computers seriously when I first got into it, which was in the 90s. It was just something I did that was interesting. And I was just like fixing computers, fixing printers, and doing animation. I was animating back in the day with a Macromedia Director and Macromedia Flash. And then I'd done some programming in school. Actually, my first programming experience was in '86. My brothers had a TRS-80. We spent 3 days typing Pong into the game, and then we spent another 3 days debugging it, finding the typos, I should say. All right. Copy says, thanks for the advice, but I need AI basic knowledge. How do you learn that? What are you trying to accomplish? Do you just want to know how it works? There's YouTube. Honestly, YouTube is the place to go if you want to understand. I'm sure there's courses out there. If you have any budget at all for something like that, maybe Skillshare might be a place to go. Any kind of online learning. But honestly, you could find probably most of what you need to know on YouTube. And just get into it and start building stuff. Find a problem or something interesting that you want to try and tackle. Make it fairly simple to start. And then see if you can build out a little bit of an automation, and then try to incorporate some AI into it. And start to understand the limitations. Start to understand what it's good at and what it struggles with. Addison says, do you know a good roadmap for becoming a data engineer? I would start with open data. So I used to live in Edmonton. Most cities have open data that you can go and play with. So you could kind of, and they even have like open data 101 tips and tricks. I was looking at some cities in the US. Lots of municipalities have open data nowadays. So you can just go find data sets. I know our government, the federal government, has open data sets. And then I would look into the tooling that I think would be most interesting for you is Jupyter Notebooks. Not saying you have to go down that road, but I would look into that. Because Cursor, which is an AI integrated development environment, and an environment for programming, they understand Jupyter Notebooks right out of the box. And so if you get into Jupyter, this is a data science tool, and you can start to explore that data. You can start to visualize it. You can start to incorporate AI to do some data enrichment. There's all kinds of things you can do. So I hope that points you in the right direction. Savvy says, have you had a chance to try the Cursor IDE? I use it all the time. I use it every day. Yeah, Cursor's fantastic, and I do Jupyter Notebooks in Cursor. because I don't have to write the code. I get Cursor to write the code and help me visualize data. Let me see if I can pull one up. I'd be happy to share. I have one here that, let me see. Here's not that one. Live streaming. No, let's go. Let's just open a new window. I'll pull up some files. Let me see if I can find. I've been doing some work for another company where we're looking at competitors. What do you call it? Social media. Basically, pull down their social media data from the competition to see if we could figure out, do some analysis to figure out what are they posting, what's getting engagement, that kind of stuff. Alt Studio I've only looked at briefly. Let me pull that up. Whenever people make recommendations, Alt Studio. I just saw something about that the other day, I think. Alt Studios? Oh, AI Studio. Sorry, is that the one? AI Studio? Yeah, AI Studio. I knew what you were talking about. My brain read that wrong. That's fine. I haven't been in here, as you can see. I've only been seeing videos about it, so I should get in there and play with it. Is there something, Bees Knees, is there something in here that's interesting or compelling that you find is better than another tool like OpenAI? You can share screen. That sounds interesting. Social media listening. Interesting. Yeah, and I think with anything else, here, let me see if I can find that. Give me a second. We always sort of just meander when we get onto my lives, which is fine. We sort of bounce all over the place. So I never quite, if I tried to have everything prepped ahead of time, I would, I'd have 14,000 windows open, and it would probably be slower to pull some of this stuff up. So I think what I'm looking for is this one here, and the analysis one, I think. Yeah, so this is it. Now, if I close this off, so this is Cursor right here, and I'll just get to the top. So we're looking at, somebody asked about data engineering. So this is Cursor, which is a development environment. And then I'm playing with Jupyter Notebooks. So what Jupyter Notebooks let you do is it's like a script, but you get these little cells. And each of these cells is like a little code box that you can write code in. And then when you run this, it can render text, or you can use data science tools to start to do little graphs and stuff. So that's what's interesting about this. And then anything that you've created in one of these cells, you get to access in subsequent cells. And so you can start to build up a story over time. So for instance, we're just looking at like, here's our social media posts over time. And then we can sort of break that out based on platform, right? And then I use some ChatGPT to categorize the content because I want to know, what kind of content are they posting, so on and so forth. So then here's the breakdown over time by category, which is, I don't know if it's insightful, but it's interesting, right? This big green gob down the middle is educational content. And then engagement score over time. This is an interesting graph because we can see all these little blue dots scattered over time here. That's all Facebook. There's the intermittent red dot, which is really hard to see in here, which is their YouTube content. The smattering of orange in the middle is all Instagram, the engagement they're getting off their Instagram. And then we can see right at the end here, they just started using LinkedIn and getting a bunch of engagement on there. It's like, again, insightful, I don't know, interesting, definitely. And then engagement score by content category. Sort of pivot this data a few different ways to try and get something interesting out of this. And I think the graph I want, now we talk about keywords. We get into these heat maps. Yeah, I'm just looking at the data, just pivoting things different ways to try and find something interesting about, what categories and all this different stuff. And I don't have the exact, because I probably have, it's probably in this one. Let me see. It's this graph right here. This one. Yep. And so I spent about 2 days kind of meandering through the data to get to this graph. This is the graph I wanted to build, which is sort of like the pink bars in the middle are all how much content was posted in each of the categories. And then the darker purple or whatever colored line that is coming down the side there, that's sort of like I think it's like the average engagement score across each of those categories. So this is sort of what I was looking for. And again, it doesn't necessarily mean anything, because this really tall pink bar in the middle here is educational content. This is the social media content, about 7,000 social media posts across 6 or 7 e-commerce platform providers is where I pulled this from. And so there's further analysis here we can do in terms of digging into, based on the content that was doing well, can we, formulate our own content that's similar and then measure how that's doing. But I kind of wanted to know what categories are doing well in terms of engagement, in contrast to how much content is being pushed out. So we can see the engagement score on the educational content, even though across these companies they've posted a ton of educational content. That's not to say that that content's not valuable. That's not saying that you shouldn't post it. I think it's just, interesting. We can see way over here on the very left, the entertaining content, of which there was very little, got a huge amount of engagement. So engagement doesn't necessarily translate directly to dollars and cents in our businesses, but it does mean that we can trigger the algorithm to push us out more, to gain a little bit more exposure, to get more followers, to grow that social media following. So again, it's interesting. It's interesting. So this is Cursor, the IDE, and then the tool. The reason Cursor is nice is because I didn't write any of this code. You can see there's actually a lot of code here. So Cursor wrote all this code for me. I just get to sort of push the button and talk into my computer, and it spits out what I want, which is great. Yeah, I see there are a few comments come in, so let me get to those. AI Studio, I will dig into that. There's so many tools out there nowadays. It's hard to know. My question is, I have lots of tools that I use that are great. They do what I want. What is so much better in AI Studio that it's like Cursor, GitHub Copilot's very similar. There's other tools. I always forget the other one, Windsurf or whatever it's called. Very similar. So my question is, why would I switch to Windsurf over Cursor? Why would I switch to AI Studio, or what's in AI Studio that's compelling that would mean that I'm going to change my workflow to switch over or use it for something? What problem is it going to solve that I can't solve right now? Savvy asked, does Jupyter have multiple prompts and outputs, or just adding iterations? So in, here, I'll just bring that back up again. The way Cursor works is it's just an editor. So you've just got an empty file that you can type code in, but I can just talk to it now. I use voice a lot. So there's 2 different ways. If I pull up the composer will let me interact with multiple files. It can create files and run system commands and do all kinds of stuff. So that's one way we can interact with it. There's also a chat, but also I can just hit Command K here, and I'm in a regular file here, and I can say, let me see, I want some JavaScript to calculate, I'll just say calculate the Fibonacci sequence, right? So this is, and it's just going to spit the code out. So then you can accept that. And I say, okay, that looks great. So now if I grab that and I'm going to make an adjustment. Now I want to say, okay, I want to print the number every iteration. Oh, spelled iteration wrong, but it'll know what I want. So then it's going to present the diff. So everything you see in green is something it wants to add. And if it's in red, that's something it wants to take away. So this is just a programming tool now. So again, the nice thing about Cursor is that it lets us write code And again, you have to know what you're writing and you have to double check that it's working and you have to work with it. But then if you use it with these notebooks, if you just give something the extension IPYNB, that will turn it into a Jupyter notebook. And then you just get these cells. I'll give you an example of that right now. So I won't save this. I'll just create a new file. I'll save this. We'll just call it test. IPYNB is going to be the extension. It immediately becomes, oh, it does this thing where it adds an I on the end. I'm not sure why. Take that off. There. So now it's a notebook. So I got this little cell here. This is a code cell. Right now it's Python. So if I say print, hey everyone, and I try to run that, I can run that either clicking the little run button. Where is it at? This one here, the run button, or shift enter. It's going to ask me which Python I want to use. I'm using 3.9. And then it prints out the value from that cell. So if I say A equals 5 or 7 and B equals 9, okay, I'll just set two variables here. And then the next cell I can say print A plus B, right? So you have access to different cells. And then you can also create these, instead of code cells, you can create markdown cells, which are just text. So this will be like a header, and this will be a list of items and some paragraph text. So the nice thing is that when you execute that, you get this nice little, you're building an interactive script that you can come back to and leave notes for, like, where did I leave off? And I use this tooling basically every day in my day job because it's so useful. All right, back to the comments. Sorry, I missed a few comments here, so let me just scroll back a bit. I'll look into AI Studio for that social media listening. I was processing thousands and thousands of records, and so whenever you're in AI systems that do that stuff, and you talk about thousands, it starts to get expensive quickly. So, but I will look into it. It looks cool. Cassidy says, I enjoy your lives, learn so much. Thank you for stopping by. And I appreciate the feedback, Cassidy. Addison says, do you have a recommendation for learning SQL? I would just start doing it. Again, I would, you can use like Cursor. So I use Cursor as a tool to learn things. Like I don't know much about React. I learned React with, I mean, like I've done React in the past, but I learned React using Cursor. Just like, oh, that's interesting. What does that do? It spit out the code, and I'm like, what is this? Use hook, use whatever, go read the docs. That's my style of learning. Otherwise, YouTube or go take a course somewhere. There's tons of material out there. And then try and model a simple problem, maybe like a to-do list, a hello world, something simple that'll just get you started and start to level up your skills a bit. Bee's Knees does coding and has multiple models and features to play with. Also does general queries too. Yeah, cool. I will definitely tie into it. V says, if you have unlimited resources, how long would it take to make a perfect copy of all of the internet? Geez, I don't know. A while. Yeah, I'm not quite sure. It would be an engineering project. Anywhere from a year to multiple years, I'm sure. Addison, so how long did it take you to do that? I think that comment came in when we were looking at those charts. A couple days. I had the bulk of what I wanted. I scraped the data in an afternoon. I always use a third-party system. $10 on almost any system will get you a massive amount of data from wherever you want. And then, yeah, just like and then another afternoon, like exploring, generating different bits of code to try and find some interesting information. Savvy asks, does Jupyter have multiple prompts? And oh yeah, no, sorry, we covered that. Bee's Knees, that I can help you with. You may find something you like. Addison, so is that Jupyter you showed? Yes, that was a Jupyter notebook. The thing that makes it Jupyter is the extension of the file. When you have that file extension, IPYNB, it's right there. IPYNB. When you put .IPYNB, then you can use Visual Studio Code, which is a free editor, or you can use Cursor, which is an AI-based editor that is based off of Visual Studio Code. They both understand how to run Jupyter notebooks inherently. You can also download Jupyter Server, which is that would be a project on its own. I would recommend either just using VS Code or Cursor because they know how to run them automatically. But when you add that extension, IPYNB, you end up with a Jupyter notebook, and Cursor knows how to render Jupyter notebooks automatically. So that's what I would recommend if that's something you want to get into. Savvy says, that's awesome. Edit, test, and learn through trial and error. That is my entire career in one sentence. All right. Well, we kind of meandered all over the place this afternoon. That's always fun. I want to look at this AI Studio for a minute. I agree to the terms. This looks just like a kind of a ChatGPT, like, what do you want to build? Get a code. We can choose our model, Gemini Pro, Gemini 2 Flash Experimental, structured output, which is super handy, code execution. So this looks very, very similar to OpenAI. Tune a model, you can do all of that kind of stuff. Google Drive access, that's kind of cool. Cool and scary at the same time, but yeah. Prompt gallery, that's cool. I think prompt management in OpenAI is something they could do a little bit better for sure. The ability to compose prompts. If you're building, I build out a lot of custom assistants. And so the ability to compose chunks, like there's certain chunks of prompts that I want as like an addendum to all of my prompts that will sort of tell the model, like, make sure you're using these phrases and not these phrases, make sure you're whatever. And so I tend to, my prompts aren't just prompts, they're like chunks of prompts that I will reuse lots of times. All right, so where do I go in here to do the social media scraping? Is that in this somewhere? AI Studio, enable autosave, compare. Okay, so we can do some comparisons. That's cool. Stream in real time. That's our chat system. We can tweak the system instructions. Spatial understanding, video analyzer, map explorer. Yeah, Addison says, so how would you social media scrape? Are you asking how would I do it with AI Studio or how would I do it personally? Yeah, so I use a tool. How would I do it personally? Regravity says, I tried to get your prompt generator and it says all your GPTs are unavailable. Interesting. Just give me a second. I'll pull it up. I don't have it publicly available. You have to click on the link. Let me go to ChatGPT. That prompt generator, I'd love your feedback too, but I use that every day. I use that like every day. My power prompt generator. It's still there. Yeah, it should be. And then I've got this. I should just publish it probably. I've just got it because I'm still sort of because I'm still at making little adjustments to it. I haven't like launched it into the marketplace or whatever, but yeah, it should still be there. I wonder, do you need a, is it only accessible if you have a paid account maybe? Hey, Gary, great to see you. Thanks for popping in. We should touch base. So yeah, let me look into that regravity. I wonder if you have a paid account, it should be accessible. If you go to there should be a link in the, you know what, just reach out to me and I'll send you a direct link. Just send me a message over TikTok and I'll send it. We'll test it out. We'll test this offline. But I should publish it soon. I should put it out there. So the question was, how do I personally scrape? I use a tool called Bright Data, but there's lots of options out there. Let me just go back here. So this is just, they have some scrapers in beta. And basically what you do is you just use their scrapers. But there's lots out there. You could use Apify, you could use whatever. And I think it costs, what is it? Maybe a penny per item. But once you get in there, let me just get logged in quick, 1 sec. back. No, I don't need to start a trial. I need to log in. Okay. So once you get into their system, you can just go and have a look at under the web scrapers. And so say like Facebook. So then you can collect posts by, where's it at now? Collect by URL, posts by group URL, posts by, it says post by post URL, but I think it's actually post by profile URL is what they mean. I know there was a typo in there somewhere. So if you go to data collection APIs, I have to refresh my authorization token now because it's on YouTube. But basically, you just put the URLs in of what it is you want to collect. And then you run it, and then they'll give you this snapshot of all of the data when it's done. So, and I think it costs about a penny per post or whatever. Let's go refresh my token right now. And then those data sets just live there for ever. You can just pull them down and process them. Now, I did some extra processing because I was pulling data sets from LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, just the four. And the data you get back from all of those different scrapers is going to be different because the way that Instagram and Facebook have the most similarity in terms of what the data looks like. And actually, we can look at that. So if we look at the raw data, let me just pull that up again. Let me see, go back into analysis. The data's in here. So if we look at the Facebook data, right, it looks like this. This is one post. It's got URL, post ID, user ID, so on and so forth. Page is verified, is sponsored. So we're looking through like number of shares, number of likes, page followers, all of that. But then if you look at the data you get back from LinkedIn, looks totally different. The shape of the data is different. User ID, num_likes. So there was a significant amount of time, the bulk of the time that I put into doing the analysis was plucking each of the data points out of all of the different data types and getting them into a standard type so that when I did this analysis across all of the post types, this was across all of those systems, because otherwise this graph looks different for YouTube than it does for Facebook, than it does for LinkedIn, than it does for Instagram. And so getting all of the data into one shape was the bulk of the work, because I wanted to be able to get further into this. For instance, if I get further down into some of the heat maps, right? So this is this map is basically the engagement score by platform. And so there's this one anomaly here, this really dark band on LinkedIn that happens to be on product demonstrations. So somebody did a product demonstration on LinkedIn that went nuts. If you take that out, you can see the actual engagement on Instagram across all of those is actually pretty consistent. Facebook is actually pretty low. YouTube's kind of all over the map. But in order to graph this, we have to get all of that data into the same shape, if that makes sense, meaning that all of the data has the same keys so we can actually work with it. That's half of the first trick in data science from my experience. Okay, refreshing my tokens. Got it. So y'all don't be using my API keys. We're going to go for another 15 minutes. If there's any last comments, it was a bit of a meandering live today. Next time, I think we're going to tie into N8N. At least that's what I want to do. I want to tie into more different tools and explore them and find out what are they good at? How can we use it? I'm always sort of trying to approach use cases from a practical perspective. We started out today with just like a really basic kind of social media automation. Maybe we'll finish the day up with that. We just had some keywords come in from an Airtable. We set this Airtable with some keywords. We used that to pull an image from Unsplash, and then we wanted ChatGPT to come up with an inspirational quote, I guess. I don't know. What did it come up with? So we passed in the keywords hiking in the mountains, and ChatGPT came up with climb the mountains within you, and every step will bring you a little closer to the view you seek. Ah, that sounds very Instagram worthy, don't you think? So let's put it out there. So then I've got this connected to my Instagram. Let me just pull that up. Let me see if I'm Instagram. I'll just get logged into my Instagram account here 1 second. Let's see. If you go to my profile, I don't post very much here. Wait a minute. How do I get there? Okay, so here we are. If you're on Instagram, I'd appreciate a follow. I have 2 followers. I just have so little traction with Instagram. Obviously, I'm not using it enough, so I need to get busy on there. But let's just run this. So we've got this quote. I'll just reset my run this module. Oh, no, that's not what I wanted. Choose where to start. Let's go back to all, save, and we'll run this. And if this goes well, it should post on my Instagram. So it's going to take that. It found a picture of hiking in the mountains. This may or may not work. Oh, it looks like it did. So let's go have a look at that now. I don't recommend posting directly. So there's hiking in the mountains. I don't see the caption. It just pulled some random post. It's not even very... Where do I find the caption here? Edit profile. I'm not very good at Instagram, so... And I don't see the caption. Oh, I didn't connect the caption. That's why. Let's go back. Let's delete this. And we might want to fine tune how we are... let's get rid of that post. That wasn't very good. Let's try this again. Again, I don't recommend just directly posting to your Instagram. I would do like a draft. So here's the caption. So now that we've got the result back from ChatGPT, let's put that in there. And then let's actually go back. So the comment come in, Manjam says, just joined, what are you making? We've been all over the place today, but this is like a really basic social media automation. We're just taking some keywords and pulling an image off of Unsplash. I'm going to put those keywords in. I'm going to also say like inspiration, inspiration. What else would you put in there? I want to sort of target like a very specific set of, I don't want just like a random, some random picture like the last one. Inspiration, amazing. Let's just try that. Let's see what we get. I'll run this one more time. So we'll go back. I see a couple comments there. I'll get to those in just a second. Choose where to start. I'll run this again. Okay. This is going straight to my Instagram, everybody. Don't do this. What did ChatGPT give us? All right, let's refresh that again. The picture's a little better. Step by step, embrace the journey and let every mountain whisper the strength within you. It's so awful. So yeah, don't do this. But the whole purpose of this was just to connect the dots, right? How do we get those pieces to work together? I have another automation that I built the other day that I've been trying for, you know, those carousels? And this would be cool to talk about as well. But basically, let me just jump in there. I was really frustrated by the fact that Canva doesn't have an API that's accessible unless you have like a enterprise account or some silly thing. So if I go in here and I go carousel, so I made my own image carousel generator with make.com. And basically what it does is I need 5 phrases. So, and it's actually what I used. If we go to my TikTok, 1 second here. I don't post these directly to my TikTok because there's a few, these ones right here. So this carousel, this make.com scenario right here, is what I used. I built just a simple HTML file that would spit out this layout, and then basically built this carousel. Oh, go back. Built this carousel just by passing in the text. So all it does is make an let me just pull up the URL here. Not the screenshot machine. 1 second. Google Drive, Tools, JSON. Oh yeah, there it is. Target URL, which is where. So this is it here. If I take this, I just built this HTML page, and if I just say, like, you don't see nothing right now, but if I paste the text in the title and the body, right? If I say hello world, then it changes to that. And then I just use another tool to take a screenshot of this, so that I was kind of frustrated that Canva doesn't have an API, which is annoying. So I sat down with Cursor for half an hour and just built out an HTML page that I could pass text into that will just render, because I mean CSS can do lots of stuff. In theory, you could have this render out an image or something and make it look kind of beautiful. And body equals something in the body here, right? Is it body or content? Geez, I forget now. Yeah, so then it'll render out both. And I can even have bits highlighted and whatnot. So another social media automation is just really simple, and then it just spits it back into a Google Drive. I can download them and stick them on TikTok. So stuff like that. Simple. That's all we're building. Just simple automations. Again, I would want to review anything you're going to put on Instagram or whatever. You should sort of review that before you just arbitrarily push it out to your social media accounts. Savvy says, how do I turn my Google spreadsheets into a simple user-friendly app? I would recommend maybe taking a look at Airtable. It's going to depend on your workflows, because you can start to build out some pretty user-friendly forms and interfaces and stuff without actually. You can keep this, what you like about the spreadsheet from Google Sheets. You get that nice spreadsheet style interface. Let's just jump over to Airtable for a minute. Let me see if I have a project I can share with you here. Social media. We did one where we were, where's the one where we were doing the Spinello's project tractor. I think it was, I was demoing this previously on probably this one, the Josh demo. No, actually, let's go back. Yeah, sorry, that is the one. Meandering as we do. Where did it go now? Oh, it's at the top now. There we go. So the thing about this is that you can still have that nice spreadsheet view where you've got a bunch of different things. This was sort of modeling a little bit of a. This was modeling a little bit of a supply chain workflow. But if you wanted to break these down, you can start to group these by their transfer status and build out a little bit nicer interfaces directly within the spreadsheet itself. Or you can also build actual interfaces where you can show different views of the data. You can have it so that the data can be editable in line. You can have it so people can submit new things. You can have it so that there's a Kanban board. So for instance, if we edit this view, and we might add a view to this list called, let's see, we'll call it, sorry, I got to make that bigger for a sec. We want a Kanban view showing the order status. We might do something like this. And the transfer status is what we want. And so we might have a view if we say we're done here. Oh, sorry, back. Come on. Constantly clicking the wrong buttons here. Edit pages, publish, yes. Now we have this board where we can collapse that, and we can see just sort of, this is a little bit naive because it doesn't have all of the information in it, but we can see, what's in the requested column, what's in transit, what's complete. These can even be set up so that they show different information for each of these cards. You can have it so that these cards are editable. You can have it so that people can submit new information. So you get to sort of build out some really just basic interfaces that will handle 80% of use cases, or even your simpler business processes. So I would take a serious look at Airtable. You can get a lot done on the free plan. When you need to start adding more users, then you're going to pay for those seats. But if it's saving you enough time, then it'll be worth it for sure. All right. How many points or tokens does this use each run? I tend not to think about, so if we were looking at one of those other automations, this one here, each of these is an operation. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's going to be 6 operations for this run, assuming there's no loops and assuming I only run it once, 6 ops. If you get into more complex workflows like this one, there's about 24, I think, in this one. And then there's a couple of loops here. So there's a loop. This may run, let me see, that's going to run 6 times per vehicle. So there's an additional 12 operations. This is going to run anywhere between 4 and 6 times per vehicle. So that's going to be anywhere up to 18 operations. So this scenario here, when I was running it against 200 vehicles, this was coming out at about 4,500 or 5,000 operations just for one execution, one kick at the can. Run through the spreadsheet once, and it would sort of burn through half my account, like on a $9 plan or something. So understanding how many operations that something is going to use definitely is important. As far as the tokens, most of what I do in ChatGPT is, as far as like LLM token usage, is pretty minimal. So I've processed a lot of stuff. People ask about tokens all the time, how much something costs. Again, if we go back to that social media automations I was showing off a bit ago, when I ran through and categorized those 7,000 social media posts using ChatGPT, I said, here's 20 categories. Put each of these into one of these 20 categories based on the content type. And I don't know, that's 7,000 posts cost me. It was nothing. It was trivial. It was $1 or $2. It wasn't much. Again, compared to because we're using it for a business case, I mean, to spend $5 or $10 on some automation stuff. And the same with this. I think I was using ChatGPT here to generate some nice descriptions for the inventory. The ChatGPT costs were like trivial. They were nothing compared to the make.com costs, which were costing me about, make.com would have been about $5 a day, and ChatGPT would have been like 5 cents a day kind of thing. Yep. All right, we're getting close to the end of the live stream today. We've been all over the place. Any thoughts or last minute comments before we shut down? Anything you'd like to see in the next stream? I'm thinking about diving into N8N. We've had some people come over to make.com from N8N, but I'd like to get a little bit more into that system. I kind of want to look at, get into the agents a little bit. I've been seeing a lot about the agents. I've been building some of my own agents manually just using make.com. Again, I like make.com because it's simple, but I want to check out some of the agent functionality in N8N and see how far we can take that. It looks kind of interesting. I stream on Friday afternoons. I try to sneak in the odd stream in between. Every once in a while, I'll get a stream in on Saturdays as well. It's a little bit harder for me in the middle of the week, but Fridays for sure. 2 p.m. Pacific is usually when I'm on. And yeah, usually Fridays. Yeah, so I want to thank everybody for jumping on the stream today. Lots of good comments, lots of good conversation. If you are an automator, you're interested in any of this stuff, we have a Discord set up. It's just small. There's only a few of us in there now. If you're looking for automation support, there's just a small group of us that are just trying to help each other out. It's free to join. Feel free to jump on if that's something that interests you. Excuse me. If you're interested, if you're struggling with your own scenarios, have questions, or if you want to contribute to those who are working on automations and have technology and want to help out, then join us on the Discord. And yeah, we'll see you there. It'll be great. All right, last minute comments, questions. We're going to shut the stream down. It's coming up on 5 o'clock. It is 5 o'clock Pacific. And my tea's getting cold, so I'm going to go fix that up. Speaking of cold, I think I'm just about done with this one. It's been a week, holy. All right, once again, thanks for coming on. I'm going to shut the stream down there, and I hope to see you on the Discord. Otherwise, we'll catch you on the next live stream. Have a good one.